The brave queen who prayed and delivered her people. The Story of Esther. Please kindly subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share. Stay tuned. In the great Persian Empire, in the city of Susa, lived a young orphaned girl named Esther. Raised by her cousin Mordecai, she lived a quiet, humble life, unaware of the extraordinary purpose God had prepared for her. Though her circumstances seemed ordinary, God was setting the stage for her to become a key instrument in the salvation of her people. When Queen Vashti was removed, King Xerxes sought a new queen to fill her place. Many young women were chosen to enter the palace, but among them all, Esther's beauty and grace stood out in a way that captured the king's heart. Esther won the king's heart with her grace and character, earning the crown as Queen of Persia, even as she kept her Jewish identity hidden. Yet, beneath the royal title, a greater purpose was unfolding, one that would soon change everything. But not all was peaceful in the Persian kingdom. A man named Haman rose to a position of great power and demanded that all bow in his presence as a sign of honor and submission. When Mordecai, a devout Jew and Esther's cousin, refused to bow because of his faith, Haman's pride was wounded, and his frustration quickly turned into a deep, burning fury. Driven by hatred and a desire for revenge, Haman devised a sinister plan. He manipulated the king with half-truths and deceit, convincing him that the Jewish people were a threat to the kingdom. As a result, the king unknowingly signed a deadly decree. On a chosen day, all Jews throughout the empire would be hunted down and destroyed. When Mordecai heard the devastating news, he tore his clothes and mourned publicly in sackcloth and ashes, a sign of deep grief and desperation. His anguish echoed across the empire as God's people everywhere wept, fasted, and cried out for mercy, fearing for their very lives in the face of the coming destruction. In the midst of the sorrow, Mordecai sent a powerful message to Esther. "Perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this." His words were more than a plea. They were a call to courage, a reminder that her position was no accident. It was a divine summons to step into her destiny and stand in the gap for her people. Esther responded with resolve, asking all the Jews in the land to fast and pray with her for 3 days. She knew the risk. Approaching the king without a summons could mean death. Yet, with unwavering faith, she chose to act. Esther would step into the king's court uninvited, placing her life in God's hands and trusting him with whatever the outcome would be. On the 3rd day, clothed in courage and faith, Esther stood before the king's throne. The law was clear. If he did not extend the golden scepter, she would be put to death. In that tense moment, the fate of a nation hung in the balance. But God moved the king's heart, and he extended the scepter, granting Esther favor and sparing her life. Esther wisely invited the king and Haman to a banquet, gaining their attention and trust. Yet, instead of revealing her request, she extended another invitation to a second banquet the following day. It wasn't hesitation, but discernment. Esther chose to wait on God's perfect timing, trusting that he was orchestrating every moment for his greater purpose. That night, the king couldn't sleep, his mind restless with an unexplained agitation. Seeking to pass the time, he had the royal records read to him, and in doing so discovered that Mordecai had once saved his life from an assassination plot, and yet had never been honored for his loyalty. At the same time, unbeknownst to the king, Haman was secretly plotting Mordecai's death, further driven by his rage and desire for revenge. Ironically, the very man Haman despised the most, Mordecai, was the one he was now commanded to honor. The king instructed Haman to lead Mordecai through the streets, proclaiming his greatness and praising him in front of all. Haman's pride and anger were crushed, as he had no choice but to publicly honor the man he sought to destroy, fulfilling a twist of fate that only God could have orchestrated. At the second banquet, Esther revealed the truth that had been hidden in her heart. With courage, she pointed to Haman and declared, "He plans to kill my people." The words hung in the air, and the king's face darkened with fury. Enraged by the treachery and betrayal, he immediately sought justice for the injustice that had been done. Haman's evil plot was brought to a swift and just end when he was executed on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. His plan, fueled by hatred, was completely crushed, and the immediate threat to the Jews was removed. However, the danger was not yet fully gone, as the king's decree to annihilate the Jews still stood, leaving a final challenge ahead for Esther and her people. Esther, driven by a deep sense of urgency, pleaded once more with the king, asking him to act on behalf of her people. In response, a new decree was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves on the very day they were set to be attacked. This decree gave them the right to protect their lives, turning the tide in their favor and offering them a fighting chance for survival. This day was marked forever in Jewish history as Purim, a celebration of how God used a brave woman and a bold prayer to save an entire people. When the fateful day arrived, the Jews stood strong and united, determined to defend their lives. With God on their side, they fought with courage and faith, trusting in His deliverance. Against all odds, they triumphed over their enemies, defeating those who had sought their destruction and securing their freedom. The day that had been intended for their destruction was transformed into a day of great joy and celebration. The Jews rejoiced in their deliverance, and the victory was marked by a new holiday, Purim. It became a time to remember and honor God's faithfulness and His miraculous intervention, as they celebrated His deliverance and the triumph of good over evil. Esther's story reminds us that one bold prayer and one act of courage can change the course of history. In her faithfulness, she became the vessel through which God's deliverance was carried out. Just as He raised Esther, for such a time as this, God is still calling people today to step into their divine purpose. Will you answer that call and be one of them? If Esther's story inspired you, comment, "God can use me," like the video, and subscribe for more Bible stories that spark faith and courage. Let's walk together in the truth that God is always working, and He can use each of us for His divine purpose.